You're listening to the Long Game Podcast with Sandra Scaiano. In a world where everyone is doing, it's easy to get lost in a sea of comparison, secret tricks, and promises of overnight success. The long game is my approach to business. The actual day in and day out philosophy that you have to show up, you have to do the work, and there's no quick fixes for long-term success. I'm a web designer, digital strategist, and energetic thinker, and I'm here to share the process and lessons I experience with my clients daily who are going through the same struggles of building a business as you are. We'll hear from successful entrepreneurs sharing their long game strategies, and I'm fun, so we're going to have a little fun along the way too. Thanks for being here. Let's get to today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Long Game Podcast. Today we have a very special guest, and I would like to welcome Jennifer Warakomski, who is a teacher, healer, and lifelong student. She's also the creator of Tuscan Wellness, a holistic lifestyle brand based in Tuscany. Yes, Tuscany, Italy. So she's got a lot of beautiful imagery on her Instagram, which I'll link to in the show notes. But I want to welcome Jennifer today, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of different energy shifts and about how you can plan your life through the energy that's happening with the moon and the different cycles. So welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, Sandra. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
And I will say, Jennifer and I have known each other forever, literally from college. So we're old school. We are long game friends. We've known each other through the bad hairstyles, the late nights out, all of that. But it just goes to show how relationships just like keep going over time. So I know her so well and she me. So I'm so excited though, because we have both entered this female entrepreneur realm together over the years, on our own paths, but we both were in corporate America and working in the fashion industry. And I'm going to let Jen tell you her story. So we kind of had this parallel life thing going for a bit together. And then we both kind of split off and did our own thing. So I love that. I love that we are, long term. So Jen, tell us a little bit about like what you do with Tuscan Wellness.
All right. Thanks. So Tuscan Wellness is a brand that was born out of my own evolution from, as you said, I was working in corporate. I was working in the fashion industry like you were, different roles, different companies, but that same energy. And what I felt was a calling to do something more. I really wanted to help people beyond having them feel good about what they were wearing and what they were buying and from the outside. I want to help people to feel good from the inside because that's what really helps people that shines on the outside in the end. So Tuscan Wellness evolved because I one day decided that I was going to move to Tuscany. So I was one of those when everyone was going right, I went left and got on a plane after obviously some back research and experience. And I decided to move to Italy, move to Tuscany specifically. And I started my company here. So while I was in the fashion industry, I also developed what I called my then side hustle, which was teaching yoga. And I moved here and I started my wellness business, which is focused around just taking care of yourself from all aspects, a holistic lifestyle. Tuscany is a really great example of how we can look to nature to dictate how we can best take care of ourselves, look to taking things slower, look to being specific and doing specific things at specific times during the year. That's really important to me, and as well as just being connected to nature in general. So I started the brand and it's continuously evolving, but I do offer retreats and workshops and trainings here, not just in yoga, but in one of my other passions, which is Reiki energy healing. So I'm also a Reiki master and they all work together. And as you know, too, I work heavily with aromatherapy and essential oils. And I'm all about the tools. I'm all about helping ourselves to feel our best and also to navigate shifts and transitions, much as I'm a product of shifting and transitioning, of transforming and awakening, if you will.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, can we all talk about the major transformation that the entire world global population has been through? I know it's perfect to have you on right now to kind of talk about all of that. I mean, first, I just want to say that I have been feeling so much. I tune into what's going on. Like I love like a card reading, and Jen was actually one of the people who, when I talked to about the crow that came to visit me all the time that actually became the icon in my logo. So like, what is the meaning behind this crow and all of that? So I get a little woo, but I'm not all the way over. But I have to say that the energy that's been happening in these past few months with like cycles of the moon and eclipses and retrogrades, that like things that haven't happened in 100 years, like there's so many energetic shifts and patterns coming through that I feel like I felt them as a person. And I think we felt them globally as well. So
yes, whether or not we want to look through it the lens of woo, which I speak Italian, English, and woo. These are my three languages.
right.
And whether or not we want to look at it through the lens, like we have to step back and realize that everything is energy, and acknowledging that there's a frequency to everything and there's a resonance, right? So just think about, if you think about someone that you connect with, you are actually resonating with them. You are resonating with their frequency. You are resonating with a place, with an experience, because everything has this energetic imprint that it offers. And we tune into it. Just like, remember when we used to have radio dials and antennas, and we would have to turn the radio to get the clear signal. That's what we also have to tune into. And I think it's so incredible and ironic that this year we're in 2020. And what is 2020 in vision? It's clear vision. And all of these things been presenting themselves to us to look at so clearly in ways that we've never looked at them before. And it's also presented us with this other idea of looking at how we do have, maybe some more than others, but we do have an addiction to certainty in so many things in life. And that's another thing, that this frequency, all of it's coming up, and these are all teaching opportunities. These are all learning opportunities for us to step back and look at. And that's why the long game is perfect, to understand that it's not just snapping our fingers and having things instantly transform. That can happen with many things, but also there's that vision of getting clear about how we are and who we want to become. Always. We're always becoming. We're never the same.
I love that as a launching off point for my next thought, because, we are at the halfway point of the year. And that is such a good reminder in terms of evaluating where you're at, what's happened, what's transpired, and where you want to go. And especially with all of the things that have happened this year and this spring, and being locked down and a global pandemic and things like that, what are those lessons you've learned? What have you taken in as a calming piece? What have you gotten rid of? What have you brought in as something that is going to help propel you forward? Like, it's a good time to think about that now. Everything is mindset in business. And I know you had a very striking, for me, Facebook Live. I'll link to it in the show notes, everyone, where Jen brought up a point about mindset, and the power of our minds is really all about creating our own reality. And like, that really moved me at this time too, because it was like, one, all of the energy shifting, and it being this time now where we're starting to phase back in. And it's like, well, you have to keep your own boundaries, whatever's important to you. What are you bringing back in? What are you taking with you going forward? And it's that mindset, because that is also how you get through the day. Like, you are creating your own reality. And I love that concept. So I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that as well, just so you're so eloquent with it and we can unpack some of those ideas in there.
Sure. Well, particularly, I think we've had these opportunities with the lockdown, the global. It's been so interesting because this is the first time in our lives that the world has been having the same conversation. In our lifetimes, we haven't, because we haven't experienced global wars, but we've had this global pandemic that we've been navigating through. So having that same conversation and looking to it is, what is the story that you are going to tell about this time? Who were you? What did you do when you think about the stories that your grandparents would tell you when you were little, and they would be like, when this happened, and they explain it to you. What's the story that you're going to tell people in 20, 30, 40 years about what you did, about how you took action in whatever way that action means to you? But thinking about it as, again, relating back to the overarching idea of where I'm going to go right now is, what is the story that you are telling yourself every single day about your life, about life, about others. And the thing that came up that I know I was talking about in that video that you saw was when you live from your circumstances, you are repeating them. And this is a really vicious cycle. So the circumstances can be anything. And when we talk about the idea of the lockdown, that was such a shock. I mean, I live in it. I'm an American living in Italy, and Italy was obviously seemed like the Western epicenter of the virus. And I remember in the beginning, my dear friends from the States calling me and saying, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" And I was like, "You guys get ready, because this is coming your way. Like, this is not the South. Like, this is a big thing. It's traveling. It's not just made in Italy kind of specialty." So, but again, the idea of looking back to when it all started into where we are now, when you said about the 6 months check-in, like when you look back to the beginning of this time, how did you feel? What was it? It was scary in the beginning. It was frightening. It was challenging. It was triggering. So many things happened. So many people have lost so much. There's been so much loss. Mostly we have to first loss of life, tremendous loss of life that has happened globally. And followed by that, by all of the other suffering that has happened, the mental and emotional suffering that has happened, the loss, the economic losses, the job losses, et cetera, the ripple effect that this has caused. It was really scary and foreign in the beginning because we didn't understand it. But now, coming forward several months, if we're sitting here and now it's the end of June that we're having this conversation, 2020, do you feel the same that you felt in the beginning about this situation? No. And that's a lot of times too, when we look at it, which I love the long game theory, when you are, for example, going on a trip, or if you're climbing a mountain, when you're halfway there, you kind of look at the top of the mountain and it's, oh my gosh, that's so far away. I can't believe it's still that far away. But how often do you turn around and look back and say, wow, I've come so far? And that's something that it's great for us to check in with ourselves and to check in with our lives and notice how far have we come and what's the story that we're going to tell about this time? What's the story that you're going to tell about your day to day and your life? Because just like I said, it's a struggle. And in the end, this is kind of a sting, but you're being irresponsible if you're constantly living from your circumstances. And it is so disempowering. It's preventing you completely from your success and your evolution and moving forward.
Yeah, I hear that concept. I mean, that resonates with me because it's something I see on a daily basis. I see it with clients. I see it with my clients' clients, and even just out in the general world. Like, we are setting our minds up for the next day, for our own successes and the work that we're doing because of the story that we're telling ourselves or what we're believing. You know, I hear a lot of, why isn't this working? I've been doing this for so long. Like, all of those kind of things where it's like, well, it does go to be one of the benefits of working with a coach or someone like that too. Like, you know, I find for myself, even in my coaching and masterminds experience, but you have someone to kind of snap you out of it. I mean, I feel like I play that role for a lot of my clients when we're on these strategic talks, like, no, okay, get yourself, head back in. This is the focus. This is the way to go. But it is possible for all those stories. Like, you have to kind of stay vigilant to tell yourself, no, I'm doing good. I'm moving forward and all of that. You know, I'm going to keep influencing, keep impacting. And we always, in our private circles, talk about it being the roller coaster of emotions, this whole small business entrepreneurial game. Like, you're so high one day and then like something has really like cut you off at the knees the next. So the whole idea of having the mindset and like, how do you get through those hurdles? Like, how you talk to yourself, how you process that. Back to the energy in the beginning of this conversation, I feel like, wow, even myself, as I consider a seasoned person in business, I'm like, whoa, I've had things happen that I'm like, oh, I didn't ever have to deal with that before. So, but you still have to move forward, deal with it and move forward. So it's all of those mind shifting, like, what are you doing to change the experience that you're having for tomorrow so that it doesn't perpetuate your story that you're living today. And this is the concept you were talking about that moved me so much in that video, is your story today is what is making your story tomorrow. The story that you're telling yourself and living. You have the power to change that.
Exactly. And let's think about it in terms of food, because we all eat. So how do you feel the day after you've gone totally off plan, eating junk food? Maybe you've been traveling and you've been eating the airport or rest stop food for an entire day. You've been bundled in the car. Like, how do you feel the next day? And it's the same idea, but with our mind. We have the result of what we have thought the following day, or even a few hours later. I am living the result of what I thought this morning. So that's a perspective. And we can choose. We can go to the junk food source for our thoughts and consistently be thinking all of the junk thoughts, or we can go to the health food thought store and go there and bring in some healthy thoughts and continue to feed our mind in that way. And we definitely will have much better results, because look, if you want to grow, you've got to let something go. I think about
oh my gosh,
garden. With my garden,
yeah.
When you go into the garden, right, you're pulling off the weeds and you're taking off the dead leaves. This is so that whole plant can survive and flourish. So it's the same thing with us. We just are mirrors of all of our surroundings.
And it's something to work at. It isn't a definitive, I'm going to change my thought today, because it sneaks back in. It's a constant. It's a habit that you create for yourself. And very much in your eating analogy, it's the same thing. You can pat yourself on the back for not having the ice cream, but like, you do want the ice cream the next day too. So you have to keep going if it's all the junk food analogy. And I think that's the piece, because with the roller coaster concept of highs and lows, like all of a sudden you are just feeling amazing. There's a rush when you are doing it right. And we're happy and we feel fulfilled and we feel the impact that we're creating, and with the people that we're working with. I mean, I feel it with my clients as well when they're telling me the impact they're making with their programs and how many lives they're impacting. But then when it comes back, like, it's that roller coaster piece. So you always have to work at it. You've got to, and like you said, have the tools to rein yourself back in, to say, well, I'm going to have to pull out a tool to get my mind in the right place, keep moving yourself along, because it's like habits you have to work at.
Yeah. And basically, if we're stressed or we're anxious, we're in the past. If we're worried and fearful, we're in the future. We're not present. So coming to the present moment, this moment, and this moment, and this moment, again and again, and recognizing it. I love the roller coaster, but I like to think of it as a circle. It's a cycle. And we get into the loop. And we have good loops and we also have bad loops. And our brain is beautiful at protecting us and keeping us safe to filter out all of the things that will maybe create a little change and therefore make our brain feel unsafe, right? The reticulator activating system in our brain, it's just like a giant filter that takes out like the thing that we are repeating the most, the thought we're repeating the most, that becomes our subconscious programming. And it can be changed, though. That's what I always say. We always have an opportunity. There's always possibility.
You can't lose hope, because there's hope that you can make that shift for yourself. Yeah, I love that you work in the concepts of the cycles. Like, those are things that we as women obviously are always been attuned to a certain extent. And then the whole energy cycle, I mean, that's something with the moon and the days that all kind of work around. And I love that concept of there is different poles. I mean, there's scientific explanations about what's happening with that, but then we can really apply that to our own daily lives and our activities and what we're doing. So like, could you explain a little bit more about how, like, in this cycle, it might be better to do this type of activity, like, or we find that out for ourselves?
Sure. And I think as women, we're highly intuitive already to understanding this. And maybe we just haven't applied the framework around it to see how that there's a right time for everything. And there's an optimal time and a time that is not so optimal and actually will deplete us. So the optimal time will help us feel the best and the most effective. And the not so optimal time is actually going to slow us down, and we won't feel as satisfied, as fulfilled, as complete as we could. And that's going, as you mentioned, our cycles and going to the moon cycle. And I like to work with both of these techniques in harmony as parallel concepts, because they are actually one concept. But thinking about the idea of men go in a 24-hour hormonal cycle. Women, we go in a 28-day hormonal cycle. And maybe you can...
Amazing.
Right? Like,
it's amazing to think about that. Like, right there is like a huge difference. It's amazing.
Huge.
Like, they cycle through all those emotions in 24 hours and we cycle through it all in 28 days.
Yes. Yes. It's quite a difference, quite a difference. And women, so we have our 4 phases with, let's just talk about the hormonal cycle. So we have our menstrual phase, then we have our follicular phase, then we have our ovulatory phase, then we have our luteal phase. And these concepts can be directly applied to the moon cycles as well. So if you are menopausal or postmenopausal, you can look to the concept or the framework of the moon, which is the same, but I'm talking strictly about where I am right now and where a lot of my clients and the people that I work with right now are, but we're all different in these different stages. Yeah. So for example, do you ever have that time of the month that you're just really tired?
Sure.
Yeah. Really tired for no reason, actually. Like you're
Yeah.
a little bit more wiped out. And then do you notice that you have that time where you get that spike of energy and you're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work out. And then there might be a time where you feel like you're more social and you're going out and you're calling people and you're posting more on social media. This all relates back to our infradian rhythm, our cycles, and how each of them applies to different behavior, tasks. And once we start to hone in on what these each are and what the qualities and characteristics are, as well as foods, I've adopted food plans to the different cycles to optimize hormonal performance. But once we start to get into these zones of understanding ourselves a little bit deeper and what our cycles are and what each phase means, then we can do things more effortlessly. Things will fall into place. We could be much more effective, feel more confident even about what we're doing, which is great, especially as entrepreneurs, because it's always unknown territory. You're pioneering a business, right?
Totally. So how do you start? Like, is it literally just picking a day of the month and starting to like, how do I feel? How do you start even on that journey?
Yeah. What I would recommend is get an app. If you're not tracking yourself already, your cycle with an app, definitely get an app. And I'll give 2 links in the show notes that you can recommend to your listeners. But follow what your cycle is looking like. And I have a downloadable that is for your audience that they can pick up to give a little bit more information about the different activities that are best suited for each of these cycles. And of course, there's lots of great resources out there. I'm happy to give some great books and tools and teachers that I've worked with that guide us a little bit more closely. But it's like you take out all of the guesswork where if I know right now I'm in my action mode, I'm in my luteal phase, this is the time to get really detailed, really make sure that everything is getting buttoned up. I'm basically in the end of summer to fall because it also relates to the season. So I'm in the end of summer to fall right now and I'm going into winter. I'm going into the menstrual. So I'm going to naturally want to be more inward, not going out so much, upping the self-care a little bit. And then after that, I'll go into my spring, which is the follicular stage. And the follicular is a great time planting the seeds. You know, we plant the seeds in spring and then we see everything start to bloom and grow in summer. That's our ovulatory. So looking at everything all together like that is where you can get started. But it's pretty easy, I would say, if you start with an app and just start tracking where you are.
See, that's so cool because I'm a planner and just even that idea of we were talking about the 6-month piece, like, okay, where have you come? What do you want to do? I'm already thinking about my 2021 plan. Like I had literally put that out there like, okay, what do I have to do now that's going to lay the groundwork for that? Because it is 6 months away and not to be living forward so much, but you have to plant seeds to have things come and bloom, So I like that idea of being able to hone in and tune in to those certain pieces by following that. So that's exciting to me. I love that concept because it's an ancient mix with my modern headspace that I'm in. I feel like, like you're not making me go back into long skirts and patchouli all the way, but taking me in some mindsets, but also being like, how am I dealing with that in modern culture and how am I applying that? I love that concept because that's where I'm at right now.
Right. And if we rewind, and I'll talk more about the moon now too, because they completely overlap. But when we think about before we had all of our wonderful innovation and modern technology, people were walking around with candles and lanterns. So at a new moon, people didn't really plan a lot of socializing and trips, but full moons, when we had the most light out at night, they were going further in their travels. They were socializing more. There were a lot of ceremonies and festivals that were all brought about. So it all ties back, and the ancient back to the modern, and we're all connected to it. I think we just have to acknowledge it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so intriguing. I love that look at what people did, and it's a tradition, and it kind of builds on it. So that's exciting. And I like being able to have an app, though, for a modern take on it.
It's so easy. I have it plugged into like the way that I schedule all of my meetings, the way I do my batch work, my content. All of it slides into these different phases, and you won't find me during my winter. Like, I've already done all of the work up front. So it takes a little bit of, like you said, planning in the beginning, but look, you're planting your seeds for your future success. And then it just becomes, again, a cycle where you're knowing this is where it is. This is where I am. I plan meetings and special Facebook Lives, videos, Instagrams, for the times when I will be at my most optimal. Like, there's always a way to link back to nature, our nature, and nature all around us to be optimized.
That is mind blowing to me, because it's a concept I didn't really think about. I mean, we all kind of know, like, hey, when you feel good and you're riding the wave and all those I talk a lot about flow, when you're in the flow of things, but like, here is a bigger concept of flow in a different way. Like, I really think this concept, it's going to help a lot of people just to even notice it and be introduced to that concept of, you don't have to be doing everything all the time. I mean, I feel like that's one of the pieces. I mean, we talk a lot about overwhelm and how people are stuck in, there's not enough time. I mean, I know you talk about this, living your circumstances of lack, of not enough time, not enough resources. All of that contributes into these feelings. But if you're able to say, like, I know that this is my optimal time to create content, to be creative. And then there's an optimal time to maybe do some of the back work or some of the admin work in your business that you have to do, all of those different pieces, and to show up. I mean, gosh, once we're back to in-person events and things like that, like, this is so interesting that you could really plan your on-stage presence around this type of thing too, to really boost what you're doing. So
you should. Here's a shortcut, ladies. So while you're ovulating, do all of your socializing, do your lives, do your video recordings, schedule your meetings. And again, I'm speaking specifically about women because, as you so clearly pointed out perfectly at the beginning of this part of our conversation, is men have the 24-hour cycle. We are on the infradian cycle of 28 days. So we operate differently energetically, and women are not designed to do the same thing every day. That is part of us fitting into the culture and the structure of patriarchy that was defined by men. So we've got to break out.
I mean, it's so clear because they can do the same thing every day because their system is regenerating every 24 hours. So when you think about it, systems defined by the patriarchy or created are fitting their working system of their physical body versus ours. Like, those kind of things just blow my mind. It's so opening, and it allows you to look at things from a different perspective and to take a step back for yourself and say, it's okay. It's okay. Like, this conversation right now, even in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I do that in my own way, but I never really understood why. Now I can maybe pay attention to it and feed into it a little bit more and help it along and help myself along with a creative process, or, like batching content or doing the lives at a certain time. Really, that is amazing. And when you think about it in the whole social construct of everything that we've been talking about now, I mean, it's another empowering piece to go back and reclaim some of these concepts. And they're science-based. Wait a minute. And they're science-based. And there's like, it isn't just woo. It isn't just woo. So.
Yes, it's woo with legitimate information and research behind it. And well, okay, I'll just go off on this aside, but it's so interesting because it's only been of recent time that this research has been available, because so much research, even research on pharmaceutical drugs and the effects on the patients and what they actually do, has been on men or women who were no longer in their cycle, so postmenopausal women. And that's just something that has come up in the last few decades where that has started to shift. But prior to that, most of the studies were done strictly on men, but the theories and the concepts, the strategies were being dictated to both sexes. So stepping back and looking at, yeah, we are not designed to do the same thing every day. That's why I think of, while you were talking, it came to mind, remember the Dunkin' Donuts commercial? I'm totally locating ourselves back in New Jersey, but the Dunkin' Donuts commercial with the guy where he's like, time to make the donuts.
Time to make the
donuts every single day. He's doing the same thing, right? That's not what we're supposed to be doing. We women are supposed to be asking, yes, have a plan, look at where you are. But if something comes up, that intuitive guidance, that whisper, listen to her. Listen to her.
Wow. Really, I'm like mind blown where this conversation has gone on that. So it's opened so many ideas for me. And it's something to try out and give yourself, like, there's no harm if you're like, oh, that doesn't work for me. But I love that idea of just feeding into what your natural rhythms are. So I'm going to give a little focus to this area and I will be reporting back on how that goes. So I hope you guys who are listening will give a try too. And we can chat about it on social media and just see like what has come of that. How do you feel? Has it let you explode a little bit in certain areas and calm down a little bit rather than having that up and down feeling all the time? I think that's part of it too, is that we haven't even talked about this piece though. We talked about it in a productivity way, but not in a emotional way, like how it is a way to kind of even keel yourself a little bit.
Absolutely. And then cycling back to living from your circumstances and repeating them, because you will repeat them. This is the vicious cycle that exhausts you. It's the idea of you're taking responsibility. So I can't wait to hear how you go working with this material a little bit more closely, because that's the struggle, is we're being irresponsible. That's where we feel the struggle. We feel the friction, and it's hard because really, when we think about responsible, what is it? What does the word mean? It means we're causing something to happen. We are being the cause of our life versus the effect. It's so empowering to think about, I'm causing this.
Wow. I'm just letting that sink in. And it's something we know about it, but we don't think about it all the time. Like responsibility has just become like a word that we don't own anymore. You know what I mean? Like we talk about it in society, but it's not something that I apply to myself in that way anymore. Like you've just given me a new way to look at that word, like being responsible for myself in a way.
Mm-hmm. Because no one's coming to save us.
Yeah, totally.
But
I just want to say that because we're talking about living in the present and being your own cause, all of that, like that doesn't mean don't plan, don't dream, don't think about the future and have ideas and brainstorm, because that's another piece that like you have to let your mind. In a past episode I talked about rest and like all the different ways that we can rest to energize ourselves, and like I do a lot of physical rest. So it's like walking or something like that, but there's also times where I'm just sitting and letting my mind go, like how important that is as well. But to dream and have thoughts about the future doesn't mean you're living in the future. So it's not that it's not about thinking and dreaming and planning and having those thoughts forward. Like you need those things to, brainstorm and have ideas, but, you have to do the work and you're following the cycle of what's happening in the present to guide you to do that work, to accomplish the dream,
Yes, you need to have a little bit of space around everything. And that's for people who have a meditation practice. Yes, we're working on becoming present constantly to the moment to moment experience. But then that's when there's that space for that amazing idea to come in. We have to create the space. It's just like the breath, the inhale and the exhale. If we were never exhaling, we can't just inhale all the time. We have to exhale too, right? So
brilliance in the simplicity of it all. And Jen has been my yoga instructor for many years as well, until she still is actually when she comes back into town, obviously not on a daily, but sometimes on video. She does her video yoga. But when she comes in town, I'm there in person. So,
And you do the restorative yoga with me, which is
yeah.
one of the most profound practices that in the beginning, I was so unreceptive to it because I always felt, and I had to learn this, was that we don't necessarily need to have a sensation in order to have a result. We don't have to feel something in order to change. We can be passive.
We can, right. There doesn't have to be action to feel something. You could be passive because I'm feeling it in there. I mean, this past time, I mean, somebody had to come like touch me to get me out of it and come back. We're like, the rest of the class is moving on. But, and I agree with you because I am such that energy person in terms of action. Like, yoga to me is like, can we do 10 push-ups too? Like, it has to have that piece in it, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. And, I've used it. I've been trained with you, I should say, practiced with you, even all through my pregnancies and all different times where like I have learned that motion and I've learned to be different in my body through it. So I've learned Ashtanga with you, where it's like very physical and active and like that filled a need in me. And then all the way through to prenatal and restorative and all of these different pieces. So I love that you bring that piece to it. And I laugh at the simplicity of like, we cannot inhale all the time.
And we also can't exhale all the time. There's got to be the balance. It's always striking a balance. But yes, and not to go too far down the yoga tangent, but yeah, when you were starting your yoga journey with me, that was over a decade ago when we were both in different stages of our life. And we were both still in the fashion industry. There was a lot of business going on, movement going on. We were both younger. And that kind of vigorous practice of constantly pushing ourselves made sense for that period of our lives. But now we're in a different season and we're receiving information and active in different ways. So it all continues to cycle and transition us. And for us to sit and listen, just take a pause and tune in. Again, going back to that radio dial, tuning in to the frequency that you're ready to receive. And you were saying about responsibility too. I just want to make sure that it's kind of hard when people, sometimes that stings when it's like, oh, well, if I'm being irresponsible because I'm struggling, then what do I do? Right. And sometimes we don't have the responsibility yet, but it will come. And that's what's also important is how much are we tolerating around ourselves? How soft are we with ourselves? How caring and gentle? How well are we taking care of ourselves every day? Even just from being hydrated and drinking enough water. Like these things all, like I said, holistically from the conversation in the beginning, it all comes in, and I'm making this shape that with my hands like a circle, but it's all a circle. It's a cycle that influences us in the center.
Awesome. I think that is a great way to wrap up this conversation and leave everyone with that sentiment of it's a cycle. It's going to come around no matter what, because that's the way the world works. I want to thank you so much for being here with me today. I have loved talking to you and talking out some of these ideas. Like I said, I think it's the most poignant time to have this conversation. So thank you so much for making the time to join me. Jen has so many things to share with you guys. You guys can find her on TuscanWellness.com. I am going to put links in the show notes to that and to her Instagram, but she's also on Instagram at Tuscan Wellness. And you should definitely go and follow her there just for the eye candy. She lives in the most beautiful place in the world. And it's a lovely escape. And just to see how she has really, she was a city girl, and like she really took it and evolved and changed her life and really went with this direction. So I love seeing it. I love supporting it. She's got a course coming out later in the year. If you are loving this kind of conversation and craving more about how to cultivate it in your life, when that's ready, I am going to definitely be letting everybody know about it. But there's ways to go deeper and do deeper learning and learn about yourself and what you can do with Jen's guidance. So we'll be bringing that out to you. And just thank you all for listening today. And Jen, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I love talking to you all of the time. My energetic thinker, you're such a great partner on this journey and dear friend. And yes, I do have that downloadable that's for your listeners. And also I'll share an email so your listeners can email me if they have questions about this. I'm here to help and I would love to help and talk about things, to shed some light on anything that we talked about today.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks for joining me today. You can access more info in the show notes at thelonggamepodcast.net. If today's show connected with you in some way, please share it with your friends or hop on iTunes and leave me a review. Until next time, keep playing the long game.